The small town had always been quiet, a place where people knew each other's routines and rarely saw anything out of the ordinary. The local community hall was not much bigger than a large living room, but it was where the town gathered for celebrations, meetings, and events. On this particular day, the hall looked brighter than usual. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, illuminating the wooden floor and the rows of chairs that had been carefully arranged. In the corner, a grand piano stood, polished and gleaming, as if it had been waiting for someone special to approach it. She had noticed the piano the moment she entered the hall. Her heart skipped a beat as she walked closer, drawn by its smooth surface and the promise of music hidden within it. She had always loved music. It was her secret world, the place where she felt free and alive. At home, she spent countless hours pressing the keys on a small keyboard her parents had given her, imagining that one day she would sit in front of a real piano and create melodies that could move people. Today, that day seemed to have arrived. But as soon as she stepped toward the piano, she felt the eyes of the crowd on her. A group of people, mostly teenagers and a few adults, whispered to each other and laughed. They pointed at her, shaking their heads, clearly amused by the idea that she might play. Some voices carried more than whispers. She could hear snide remarks about how she would probably just make a mess of the beautiful instrument. Their skepticism hung in the air like a heavy fog, and for a moment, she felt the familiar pang of doubt. What if they were right? What if she was not ready? She hesitated, her hand hovering above the keys. She could feel her pulse in her throat, her palms slightly sweaty. The laughter and scoffs were loud enough to make her second-guess herself, but deep down, there was a spark that refused to die. It was not about proving them wrong, she reminded herself. It was about the music, about expressing the feelings she had carried inside for so long. The piano was not just an instrument. It was a voice, a way to speak when words fell short. Taking a deep breath, she tried to block out the whispers. She remembered the evenings spent at home, sitting alone in her room with the small keyboard, letting her fingers explore the notes without fear. Those were moments of pure joy. Moments when she could lose herself in sound and rhythm. She let those memories fill her with courage. Slowly, she lifted her hands and placed them on the keys of the grand piano, feeling the cold smoothness beneath her fingers. The crowd's murmurs faded slightly as she focused on the instrument, on the potential that lay within each note. At first, she played softly, almost hesitantly, like a bird testing its wings. The sound was gentle, careful, yet there was a warmth to it that drew some attention. A few heads turned, curiosity replacing the earlier amusement. The melody she created was simple, but it carried a sense of sincerity that was hard to ignore. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to sink into the music, to forget the doubters and the noise around her. As the first few notes settled in the hall, she began to feel a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Every fiber of her being was alive, tuned to the vibrations of the piano. She realized that she had never felt this way before, not even in her quiet practice sessions at home. This was different. This was real. This was connecting with something bigger than herself. The audience, still whispering, was beginning to notice the change in her demeanor. There was focus in her eyes, a quiet determination that demanded attention. She started to play more confidently, letting the melody flow naturally. Her fingers moved with purpose, finding patterns and harmonies she had only imagined before. Each note seemed to tell a story of her dreams, her struggles, and her hopes. The room was no longer just a hall filled with people. It had become a space where her emotions could breathe, where her music could reach out and touch hearts. Even those who had scoffed initially felt a strange pull toward the sound, a recognition that this girl, this quiet and seemingly ordinary girl, had something special to offer. Despite the growing engagement, she did not let herself be distracted by the shifting mood of the crowd. She knew that the real challenge was not winning their approval but staying true to the music. The piano responded to her touch in ways that were almost magical. The notes rose and fell, creating waves of sound that filled every corner of the hall. She could hear the echo bouncing off the walls, adding depth and resonance to the melody. For the first time, she felt completely in sync with her instrument, as if they were speaking the same language without the need for words. A few moments passed, and she noticed subtle changes in the audience's expressions. The smirks were gone. People were leaning forward in their seats, drawn to the story the music was telling. Eyes widened, hands clasped, and some held their breath. It was as if the music had cast a spell, silencing the doubts and scoffs that had greeted her just moments ago. She felt a rush of confidence, a sense that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Her fingers danced over the keys, experimenting with dynamics and rhythm. She let herself be playful at times, gentle at others, exploring the full range of emotion that the piano could convey. Each movement was deliberate yet fluid, guided by intuition and feeling rather than rigid technique. She realized that music was not just about hitting the right notes, but about telling a story that could resonate with anyone willing to listen. And in that hall, for the first time, she felt that people were truly listening. As the piece progressed, she became more aware of the subtle connections forming in the room. She could sense the audience reacting not just to the notes, but to the honesty behind them. There was an energy shift, a quiet respect growing where mockery had once stood. She did not need to glance at the crowd to know it. The feeling was unmistakable. Music had the power to break down barriers, to transform judgment into admiration, and she was witnessing it firsthand. The piano had always been her companion in solitude, a way to express what she could not put into words. Today, it had become a bridge between her and the world around her. She felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for every hour she had spent, practicing alone, for every mistake that had taught her patience, for every melody that had allowed her to dream. All of it had led to this moment, a moment where her passion and dedication were finally shining through. She continued to play, fully immersed in the music, letting it flow through her with a sense of purpose and freedom. The initial fear and self-doubt had faded, replaced by a quiet determination and joy. She knew that this was just the beginning of a journey where her love for music would guide her and where she would continue to grow, no matter what others thought. The piano, once an object of intimidation, had become a source of strength, a tool through which she could share a part of herself with the world. The room, once filled with whispers and laughter, now held a different kind of silence. It was a silence filled with anticipation, respect, and awe. She could feel the collective attention of the audience, their eyes and hearts drawn to the music. And in that silence, she discovered something profound: the power of staying true to oneself, the courage to follow one's passion, and the beauty of connecting with others through art. That day, she had taken the first step, not just toward the piano, but toward her dreams, and she felt ready to embrace whatever came next. The girl continued to play, her hands moving over the keys with a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. Each note seemed to speak for her, telling the story she had carried inside for years. As she played, she could feel her nervousness melting away, replaced by a sense of calm focus. It was as if the piano itself had become a part of her, responding to her thoughts and emotions with every touch. The room, once filled with whispers and scoffs, had grown quieter, and she could sense a shift in the audience's attention. The first few notes had captured curiosity, but now her music began to capture hearts. The melody flowed smoothly, rising and falling like gentle waves, pulling people in and holding them there. Some faces that had once been skeptical now showed surprise, their eyes widening in appreciation. The laughter and mockery had faded, replaced with a quiet wonder. Even those who had doubted her could not help but feel moved by the honesty and emotion in her playing. She felt the energy of the audience without needing to see every face, sensing their reactions in the subtle changes in posture, the soft intake of breath and the steady gaze of those who had once mocked her. Her fingers glided over the keys with more confidence now. She was no longer tentative, no longer second-guessing herself. Instead, she allowed the music to guide her, letting her instincts take over. She explored different melodies, weaving them together in a way that felt natural and effortless. The piano had become a voice for her emotions, a way to communicate with the world without words. Each chord carried a feeling, each note a message. She could express joy, sadness, hope, and longing all at once, and the audience could feel it. It was a connection deeper than she had ever imagined. As she played, memories from her past filled her mind, shaping the music she created. She thought of quiet evenings spent at home, practicing alone, dreaming of this very moment. She remembered the times she had been told she was wasting her time, that music would never bring her anywhere. Those words, once heavy and discouraging, now fueled her determination. Every note she played was a declaration that she had persevered, that she had chosen her passion despite the doubts of others. The piano was not just an instrument. It was a witness to her journey, a companion that had shared in her struggles and triumphs. The girl noticed small changes in the crowd. People who had been whispering and exchanging glances were now watching her intently. A few leaned forward, captivated by the story unfolding in the music. Others closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them, feeling emotions they hadn't expected to encounter. The energy in the room shifted from judgment to curiosity, and finally to admiration. It was a subtle transformation, almost imperceptible at first, but it was undeniable. She could feel the room responding, not just to the technical skill she displayed, but to the sincerity and emotion that poured from her heart into every note. With each passing moment, her confidence grew. She experimented with dynamics, playing some sections softly, almost whispering, and others with strength and passion. She allowed herself to be playful with the melody, exploring variations and harmonies that felt right in the moment. The music was alive, breathing with her, responding to her every thought and feeling. She felt an exhilarating sense of freedom, knowing that she could express herself fully without fear of judgment. The piano was not just an instrument. It was a friend, a partner in a conversation that needed no words. The girl also became aware of the subtle ways the audience was reacting. She noticed a few people leaning closer, their eyes fixed on her hands as they moved over the keys. She saw smiles forming, hands clasped together in quiet appreciation, and some even shaking their heads in disbelief at her skill. It was a profound moment, realizing that her music could touch people in such a deep and meaningful way. The connection she felt with the audience was both humbling and empowering. She understood that music had the power to change the atmosphere of a room, to turn doubt into admiration, and to bring strangers together in a shared experience of beauty and emotion. Despite the attention, she remained focused on the music itself, letting it guide her every movement. She was not performing for the audience. She was sharing a part of herself, something deeply personal and true. This authenticity resonated with the listeners, drawing them in and holding their attention. She felt a sense of responsibility, not to impress, but to honor the music and the feelings it carried. Every note mattered, every pause, every delicate touch of a key was intentional, a reflection of the emotions she wanted to convey. As the piece continued, the girl allowed herself to feel the full range of emotions that the music brought out. There were moments of joy, where her fingers danced across the keys with lightness and energy. There were moments of melancholy, where the melody slowed and the notes lingered in the air heavy with emotion. There were moments of hope and longing, where the music seemed to reach beyond the walls of the hall, connecting with something greater. Each emotion flowed naturally into the next, creating a tapestry of sound that was rich, dynamic, and deeply moving. She also noticed that playing in front of others had brought out a new level of creativity in her. She experimented with different techniques, combining rhythms and melodies in ways she had never tried before. The piano responded to her touch with a responsiveness that was almost magical. She felt an incredible sense of satisfaction, realizing that all of her practice and dedication had prepared her for this moment. The music was no longer just a series of notes. It was a living, breathing expression of her heart and mind. The audience continued to be captivated. Some people had tears in their eyes, touched by the emotional depth of her performance. Others were smiling, amazed at how someone so young and unassuming could command such skill and expressiveness. Even those who had been the loudest in their mockery were now silent, listening intently, perhaps realizing for the first time that talent and passion could not be judged by appearances alone. The girl felt a sense of quiet triumph, not from proving anyone wrong, but from knowing that she had shared something real, something that mattered. As the music reached a gentle, reflective passage, the girl allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, to soak in the atmosphere she had helped create. The hall was filled with a profound stillness, a collective acknowledgement of the power of music to touch hearts. She felt a wave of gratitude, not just for the opportunity to play, but for the chance to connect with others in such a meaningful way. The piano had become a bridge between her and the audience, a medium through which emotions could flow freely and honestly. With renewed energy, she continued, building the melody toward a crescendo that was both powerful and elegant. The notes rose and fell, creating a sense of movement and momentum that carried the audience along. The girl was fully immersed, lost in the joy of creation and the thrill of sharing it with others. She felt alive in a way she had never experienced before, aware that this moment was unique and precious. Every sound, every vibration of the keys under her fingers was a testament to her love for music and her dedication to her craft. By the time the piece reached its climax, the girl had become completely absorbed in the music. She was no longer aware of the room, the audience, or even herself. She was simply playing, letting the piano speak for her, conveying emotions that words could never capture. The melody soared, powerful and commanding, yet delicate and nuanced. It was a moment of pure artistic expression, a culmination of years of practice, passion, and perseverance. The final notes lingered in the air, soft and fading, as if reluctant to leave the space they had filled. The girl's hands rested lightly on the keys, and for a brief moment there was complete silence. It was a silence filled with awe, respect, and an unspoken connection between the performer and the audience. She opened her eyes slowly, taking in the reactions of the people around her. There were no words, only expressions of amazement and admiration, as if the music had spoken more clearly than any conversation ever could. The girl felt a deep sense of satisfaction and fulfillment. She had not played to impress or to prove anyone wrong. She had played because it was a part of who she was, and she had shared that part of herself with others. The audience's response, though gratifying, was secondary to the joy and connection she had experienced while playing. She realized that true artistry came from authenticity, from embracing one's passion and expressing it fully, without fear or hesitation. As she took a final, deliberate breath, she felt a quiet confidence settle over her. She had faced the doubts, the laughter, and the skepticism, and she had emerged stronger and more certain of her abilities. The piano had been more than an instrument. It had been a companion, a teacher, and a voice for her emotions. She knew that this was only the beginning of her journey, that there would be many more moments to play, to express, and to connect through music. And with that thought, she felt ready to continue, eager to explore the endless possibilities that lay ahead. The girl had found a rhythm that felt like it belonged to her, a melody that seemed to speak from her very soul. She had been playing for what felt like hours, yet it had only been a few minutes. Time seemed to bend around the music, stretching and folding in the space she created with her hands and heart. Every note she played carried a story, a small piece of her life, and each chord resonated with emotions she had never dared to show. The audience, once doubtful and mocking, now watched in a mix of awe and disbelief. They had not expected such skill, such feeling, or such passion from someone they had casually dismissed. She let herself move more freely now, her hands gliding across the keys with fluidity and purpose. The music was no longer just a series of notes. It had become a language of its own, expressing everything she could not say with words. She thought of the struggles she had faced, the lonely hours of practice at home, and the small victories that had built her confidence. Each note was a reflection of her journey, a testimony to her perseverance and love for the art. As she played, she felt an extraordinary sense of liberation, as if the piano had unlocked something deep within her, something that had been waiting for this very moment. The audience's reaction was shifting more visibly. Whispers had faded completely, replaced by attentive silence. Some people leaned forward in their chairs, unable to take their eyes off her hands as they danced over the keys. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, connecting with emotions they had not expected to feel. The energy in the room was changing, transforming from judgment to admiration, from doubt to a quiet reverence. She could feel it, a subtle but undeniable response that motivated her to play even more expressively. With every passing moment, her fingers moved more confidently, creating harmonies and melodies that intertwined seamlessly. She explored the depths of the piano, from the softest whisper to the loudest, most resonant chord. The music was alive, as if it had taken on a life of its own. Responding to her emotions and intentions, she experimented with rhythm and tempo, adding variations that made the piece feel personal, unique, and compelling. Her connection to the instrument was profound, a bond that allowed her to communicate directly with the hearts of those listening. As she played, she remembered the times she had been told she would never succeed, that her passion for music was a waste of time. Those words, once painful, now fueled her determination. She played not to prove anyone wrong, but to honor her dedication, her effort, and her love for music. Each note was a small victory, each chord a declaration that her dreams were valid, her talent real. The piano had become more than an instrument. It had become a partner, a witness to her perseverance and resilience. The girl noticed subtle changes in the audience. Faces that had been skeptical were now open with curiosity and wonder. People who had scoffed or whispered now listened with rapt attention, captivated by the emotion and skill she displayed. She could sense their surprise, their admiration, and even a touch of disbelief. The transformation in their expressions mirrored the transformation within her own confidence. She felt a surge of courage, a deep reassurance that she belonged here, playing the music that had always been a part of her. She let the music carry her further, exploring nuances she had only dreamed of attempting. Each note was deliberate yet flowing naturally, guided by instinct and feeling rather than strict rules or technique. The melody rose and fell, building tension and releasing it in ways that felt instinctive, heartfelt, and true. She experimented with crescendos and decrescendos, allowing the music to breathe, to swell and diminish, capturing attention and emotions alike. She could feel the audience following her lead, their attention locked on every movement, every chord. The girl's emotions became intertwined with the music. She felt joy, excitement, nostalgia, and even a gentle sadness, and all of these emotions found their way into her playing. The piano responded to her touch with a resonance that was almost magical, amplifying every feeling she expressed. She had always believed that music could touch people in profound ways, but experiencing it firsthand was different. She could see the impact, not just hear it, and it inspired her to play with even more depth and honesty. As she progressed, the hall seemed to transform around her. The ordinary space, once familiar and small, had become a sanctuary for music and emotion. Every corner, every wall seemed to echo her story, resonating with the vibrations of her playing. The audience was no longer just a crowd. They were participants in her narrative, sharing in her journey through the language of sound. The connection between performer and listeners was unspoken yet powerful, a shared understanding that transcended words. The girl also became aware of her own growth in the process. She realized that the performance was not just about impressing others or proving herself. It was about expressing her truth, about letting her passion shine without fear. She had faced moments of doubt, ridicule, and hesitation. Yet here she was, fully immersed in the music, sharing herself in ways she had never dared before. The piano had become a mirror, reflecting her inner strength, resilience, and creativity. She continued to explore the full range of the piano, moving from soft, delicate passages to bold, resonant chords. She experimented with rhythm and tempo, adding subtle variations that made the piece feel dynamic and alive. Her hands moved with grace and confidence, almost dancing over the keys, yet every movement was intentional, every note purposeful. She felt a sense of harmony with the instrument, as if they were speaking the same language, understanding each other perfectly. The audience remained captivated. People were leaning closer, some with eyes wide in admiration, others with tears glistening, touched by the depth of emotion conveyed through the music. Even those who had doubted her skill were now fully engaged, unable to look away. The energy in the room had shifted completely. Skepticism and mockery had vanished, replaced by appreciation, awe, and a shared sense of wonder. The girl could feel the power of music to transform perceptions, to bridge gaps between people, and to create connections that went beyond words. With each note, she felt a growing sense of empowerment. She was no longer just a girl at a piano. She was a storyteller, a conduit for emotions that needed a voice. The music carried her feelings, her experiences, and her dreams, reaching out to touch those willing to listen. She had discovered a strength within herself, a courage to be vulnerable and authentic, and it manifested in every chord she played. As the piece neared its climax, the girl allowed herself to fully embrace the moment. The music surged with intensity, yet remained controlled and expressive. She felt a sense of unity with the audience, a shared emotional journey that transcended the physical space of the hall. Every note was a statement, every melody a testament to her dedication, passion, and authenticity. She realized that this performance was more than just a display of skill. It was a declaration of who she was, what she loved, and what she could achieve. The final section of the piece was a blend of powerful chords and gentle, lingering notes. The music seemed to hover in the air, touching every listener, leaving a lasting impression that would not fade quickly. The girl's hands moved with precision and grace, expressing a depth of feeling that words could not capture. The hall was filled with an almost tangible sense of connection, as if the music had woven an invisible thread linking her heart with every person present. When the last note finally faded, a profound silence followed. It was a silence charged with awe, respect, and a recognition of something extraordinary. The girl sat still for a moment, letting the atmosphere settle, feeling the weight and impact of what she had just shared. She had not only played a piece of music, she had shared a part of herself, a piece of her journey, and in doing so, she had transformed the perceptions and emotions of those around her. In that quiet moment, she understood the true power of music. It was more than entertainment. It was communication, connection, and expression. She had taken a risk, faced judgment, and embraced vulnerability, and the result had been something beautiful and meaningful. The audience, now fully attentive and engaged, reflected back the impact of her performance through their awe, admiration, and unspoken appreciation. She had discovered a profound truth. When one follows their passion with authenticity and courage, the results can surpass expectation and touch lives in ways that are both powerful and unforgettable. The hall was filled with a hushed sense of anticipation as the girl continued to play. The audience, now completely captivated, hung on every note, every movement of her hands, and every shift in the melody. She could feel their eyes on her, their attention no longer questioning her but fully absorbed in the music. The energy in the room had transformed from skepticism to wonder, and it energized her in a way that made her fingers move even more freely and confidently. The piano had become an extension of herself, and through it she was telling a story that words could never capture. She had learned to play with not just skill, but with intention. Each note was a brushstroke on a canvas, each chord a sentence in a story that only she could tell. She allowed herself to explore the full emotional spectrum, moving seamlessly from soft, reflective passages to bold, powerful sections. The music rose and fell like waves, drawing the audience in and carrying them along on her journey. It was a dance of sound, a conversation between her heart and theirs, and she reveled in the feeling of connection it created. Her mind drifted to memories of her earlier struggles. She remembered times when her love for music had been dismissed, when people told her she was wasting her time or that she would never succeed. Those moments of doubt had once felt heavy, like stones pressing on her chest, but now they fueled her determination. Every note she played was a testament to her perseverance, a quiet declaration that she had refused to let negativity define her. The piano became a symbol of her resilience, a vessel through which she could express the strength she had cultivated over the years. She noticed subtle reactions in the audience. Some were leaning forward, mesmerized by the precision and emotion in her playing. Others had their eyes closed, letting the sound envelop them, transporting them to a place beyond the ordinary. She could sense a shared emotional experience, an invisible thread connecting all of them through the music. It was humbling to realize that something she loved so deeply could touch others in such a profound way. That understanding deepened her commitment to the performance, pushing her to play with even greater sincerity and passion. Her fingers moved with fluidity and purpose, each note carefully chosen but flowing naturally. She experimented with dynamics, allowing some phrases to whisper softly while others soared with intensity. The contrast created a rhythm and tension that held the audience in suspense, drawing them closer into the story she was telling. She felt a growing sense of liberation, knowing that she could communicate complex emotions without words, letting the piano do the speaking for her. The melody evolved, growing richer and more intricate. She introduced subtle harmonies and unexpected transitions, blending technical skill with emotional depth. The hall seemed to vibrate with the resonance of the piano, each note echoing and amplifying the emotions she conveyed. She could feel the audience's response not just in the silence that followed, but in the way they leaned in, the way they held their breath, and the way their expressions reflected the impact of her music. The connection was mutual, a silent acknowledgement of the power of artistry and vulnerability. She allowed herself a brief moment of reflection in the middle of the piece. Her eyes closed. She let the memories of her journey wash over her. The late nights of practice, the moments of self-doubt, the small victories that had fueled her passion. She felt gratitude for the piano, for the music, and for the opportunity to share it. Those quiet moments of introspection strengthened her resolve, giving the next passage a depth and authenticity that resonated even more powerfully with the listeners. The music shifted, moving into a section that was both delicate and emotionally charged. She played with nuance, allowing the softness of the melody to convey vulnerability and tenderness. Each note lingered in the air, drawing the audience into the emotional landscape she was painting. The hall was silent except for the sound of the piano, yet the silence was alive, charged with anticipation and awe. She could sense that the audience was not merely listening. They were feeling, experiencing, and connecting with the story she was telling. As the piece progressed, she began to introduce more dramatic flourishes. Her hands moved rapidly over the keys, producing complex passages that required both precision and expression. The technical difficulty of the music was evident, but it never felt forced. It was a natural extension of the emotional narrative she was creating. She felt a surge of exhilaration, realizing that she had grown to a level where her skill and her heart were in perfect harmony. The audience responded, their attention unwavering, their admiration palpable. She was keenly aware of the transformative effect her music was having. The room, once filled with doubt and skepticism, was now united in a shared experience of wonder and admiration. The music had broken down barriers, silenced judgment, and created a space where everyone could experience something beautiful together. That realization filled her with a sense of purpose and fulfillment. She understood that music was not just about performance or recognition. It was about connection, expression, and the ability to touch lives in ways that words often could not. The piece reached a point where she combined power and subtlety in a way that seemed almost effortless. She moved seamlessly between strong, resonant chords and delicate, lingering notes. Each transition was intentional, designed to evoke specific emotions and to guide the audience through a journey of feeling. She felt a profound sense of control, not in the sense of domination, but in the sense of mastery over her own expression and the ability to share it meaningfully with others. Her focus intensified as she approached the climax of the piece. Every muscle in her body was engaged, every thought directed toward the music. She felt a surge of energy, a combination of adrenaline and deep emotional investment that propelled her fingers across the keys. The melody soared, the harmonies intertwined, and the dynamics created a sense of movement and momentum that carried the audience along. She was not simply playing notes. She was telling a story, expressing a range of human experiences that resonated deeply with those who listened. The audience was completely absorbed. Some had tears in their eyes, moved by the vulnerability and authenticity of her performance. Others were leaning forward, fascinated by the technical skill and the emotional depth she displayed. Even those who had been most skeptical were now silent, fully engaged, and perhaps reconsidering their initial judgments. The energy in the room was electric yet serene, a delicate balance that reflected the power of her music to unify and inspire. As she played, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for the opportunity to share her music, for the support and inspiration she had received along the way, and for the resilience that had brought her to this moment. She understood that every challenge she had faced, every moment of doubt, and every hour of practice had contributed to this experience. The piano was not just an instrument. It was a companion, a teacher, and a medium through which she could express the depth of her soul. The final passage approached, delicate yet powerful, weaving together the themes and emotions she had explored throughout the performance. She allowed the music to linger on certain notes, creating moments of reflection and introspection. The room seemed to hold its breath, fully attuned to the story unfolding before them. She could feel the collective heartbeat of the audience, the unspoken connection that had formed through the shared experience of music. It was a moment of pure artistry, a culmination of skill, emotion, and intention. When the last note finally faded, there was a brief pause, a silence so profound it felt tangible. The audience remained still, as if reluctant to break the spell that had been cast. The girl sat back slightly, allowing herself to feel the impact of what she had shared. She had not only played a piece of music, she had created an experience, touched hearts, and transformed perceptions. The power of her passion, authenticity, and dedication had been felt by everyone in the hall. The silence gradually gave way to the first signs of appreciation. People began to clap softly, their admiration and respect growing with each passing moment. The applause was not just for her technical skill, but for the courage, vulnerability, and sincerity she had shown. The girl smiled quietly, feeling a mixture of humility and pride. She knew that the journey was ongoing, that there would be more music to play, more stories to tell, and more connections to be made. But in this moment, she allowed herself to savor the profound sense of accomplishment and fulfillment that came from sharing her heart through music. She realized that the true reward was not in the applause or recognition, but in the ability to touch lives, to communicate emotions, and to create a shared human experience. The music had transcended the physical space of the hall, connecting her with each person in a way that was both intimate and universal. She had discovered the transformative power of art, the ability to convey meaning and emotion without words, and the profound satisfaction of following her passion with authenticity and courage. The final notes of her piece had barely faded when a wave of emotion swept through the hall. The girl sat quietly for a moment, letting the silence settle, letting the weight of what had just occurred sink in. She had played not just with her hands but with her heart, and the room had responded in a way that no applause could fully capture. The audience sat still, some with wide eyes, some with hands pressed to their chests, others with tears glistening. It was a silence heavy with respect, awe, and a shared understanding that something extraordinary had just taken place. The girl slowly rose from the piano bench, her hands still hovering over the keys. She took a deep breath, letting the energy of the room wash over her. Every glance, every expression in the audience told her that her music had reached them, had connected with them in a way that transcended words. The doubts and scoffs from earlier seemed like a distant memory, erased by the power of her performance and the authenticity she had brought to it. In that moment, she realized that music was not about proving herself to others. It was about expressing the truth of her own spirit. As the first applause broke the silence, she felt a rush of warmth and gratitude. The clapping grew louder, more enthusiastic, and people began to rise to their feet. The sound was not just appreciation but acknowledgement, an unspoken recognition of the courage it had taken to play with such vulnerability and passion. She smiled softly, a mixture of humility and pride filling her chest. The moment was surreal, almost dreamlike, yet deeply real in every way that mattered. She had shared her heart, and it had been seen, heard, and felt. People began to approach her, some with smiles of admiration, others with gentle words of praise. She listened, nodded, and thanked them quietly, absorbing their reactions with a sense of wonder. They spoke of how moved they were, how unexpected and powerful the performance had been. Some admitted they had doubted her at first, and now they were humbled and inspired. She realized then that her music had done more than entertain. It had transformed perceptions, challenged assumptions, and created a space of shared emotion and understanding. A few of the older members of the audience approached her with gentle encouragement. They shared stories of their own experiences with music, of the comfort and joy it had brought them over the years. She listened intently, feeling a sense of connection that went beyond generational gaps. Music had become a bridge between lives, a universal language that could convey feelings words often could not. She felt honored to be part of such a shared experience, humbled by the impact her playing had made on the people around her. The girl walked around the hall after the applause had quieted, taking in the faces of the audience. She saw reflection, admiration, curiosity, and even a sense of inspiration in their eyes. She realized that each person had taken something different from her performance, that her music had become a mirror reflecting their own emotions and experiences. It was a profound moment of understanding, that art is not simply about creation, but about the connection it fosters, the feelings it evokes, and the memories it can stir. She returned to the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys as if saying goodbye to an old friend. The instrument had been a vessel for her emotions, a companion on a journey that had started long before she had ever imagined this moment. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the piano, for the hours of practice, and for the courage that had allowed her to perform in front of an audience for the first time. Every note she had played had been a reflection of herself, and now she could feel that reflection mirrored in the eyes of those who had listened. The girl's thoughts drifted to the future. She knew that this was only the beginning of her journey. With music, that there were many more pieces to play, Many more stories to tell and countless opportunities to touch hearts. She felt inspired, motivated, and ready to continue learning, practicing, and sharing her music. The experience had shown her that fear and doubt were natural, but they were never stronger than the courage to follow one's passion and the desire to express oneself authentically. As she packed up her belongings and prepared to leave the hall, people continued to approach her, sharing words of encouragement and admiration. Some wanted to ask about her practice, her inspiration, or how she had learned to play with such feeling. She answered gently, offering insight into her dedication and the love she had for music. She could see the spark of inspiration in the eyes of others, and it filled her with a sense of purpose. She realized that her performance had not only transformed her own confidence but had also planted seeds of passion and hope in those who had witnessed it. Walking outside into the warm light of the afternoon, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The events of the day had been intense, emotionally and physically, yet she felt more alive than ever. She reflected on how far she had come, from practicing alone at home, to facing doubt and mockery, to creating a moment that had touched the hearts of many. The journey had been challenging, but the reward was immeasurable. She understood that the true measure of success was not in applause or recognition alone, but in the authenticity of expression and the ability to connect with others through art. As the day drew to a close, she thought about the lessons she had learned. She had discovered the importance of perseverance, the value of authenticity, and the transformative power of passion. She had learned that doubts and scoffs were only temporary obstacles and that courage and dedication could overcome even the harshest skepticism. Most importantly, she had discovered the profound joy that comes from sharing one's heart and soul through music, a joy that was contagious and enduring. In the days that followed, the memory of the performance lingered not only in her mind, but also in the minds of those who had witnessed it. People spoke of the unexpected talent, the emotion, and the authenticity of the performance. Some admitted that it had inspired them to pursue their own passions, to face their own doubts, and to embrace their own talents. The girl realized that music had created a ripple effect, spreading inspiration and courage beyond the walls of the hall, touching lives in ways she had never anticipated. She returned to her practice with renewed determination. The experience had strengthened her skills, expanded her emotional range, and deepened her connection with the piano. Every practice session became an opportunity not only to improve technically, but also to explore new ways of expressing herself. She understood that her journey was ongoing, that every note she played could be a story, a message, or a connection to someone who might need to hear it. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a companion, a teacher, and a bridge to the world. Reflecting on the entire experience, she felt a profound sense of growth. She had faced fear, skepticism, and doubt, yet she had emerged stronger, more confident, and more authentic. She had discovered that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in spite of it. Her music had become a reflection of her heart, a channel through which she could communicate with others, and a testament to the power of dedication and passion. The girl knew that there would be challenges ahead, that not every performance would be met with immediate admiration or understanding. Yet she also knew that the experience of this day had prepared her to face those challenges with resilience and grace. She had learned the importance of staying true to herself, of valuing the process as much as the result, and of finding joy in the act of creation itself. The applause, admiration, and respect she had received were meaningful, but the true reward lay in the connection she had fostered and the authenticity she had expressed. As she looked back on the journey, from the early doubts to the triumph of her performance, she felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The music had been more than a display of talent. It had been a journey of self-discovery, courage, and connection. She had discovered the power of her own voice, the beauty of vulnerability, and the joy of sharing her passion with others. The experience had changed her, not just as a musician but as a person, instilling a confidence and sense of purpose that would guide her for years to come. In the quiet moments that followed, she understood the lasting lesson of that day, that true artistry comes from authenticity, courage, and dedication, that sharing one's heart and talent can transform not only the self, but also those who are willing to listen, that the power of music, or any passion pursued with sincerity, has the ability to inspire, heal, and connect. And with that understanding, she felt ready to continue her journey, to face new challenges and to embrace the endless possibilities that lay ahead with hope, determination, and the unwavering love of music.